Hello, I hope that you are doing okay. Here's a story: The Grateful Animals. A man and a woman who had 3 handsome sons were too poor to give the boys any present when they set out to seek their fortunes, except a loaf of bread each and their blessing. The youngest of the 3 was called Ferko, and he was a beautiful youth with a splendid figure, blue eyes, fair hair, and a fine complexion. His 2 brothers were as jealous of him as they could be, and wished only to do him as much harm as possible. Their chance came very soon, for on their travels they came to a desert where there was nothing to eat, and their loaves of bread became extremely precious. Then the 2 wicked brothers hatched a cruel plot. As Ferko lay sleeping under a tree during the midday heat, they took his loaf and ate up every scrap of it between them. When Ferko woke, he turned to eat some of his bread, for he was already desperately hungry, only to find it gone. "You horrible glutton," cried the brothers. "You ate every scrap of it in your sleep, and so you may starve as much as you like. You won't get a scrap from us." Ferko was puzzled by this, for his stomach told him plainly that he had eaten nothing for several days. However, he went on in silence for a day and a night, until he could hardly stand for hunger. "Give me a scrap of your bread," he begged at last. "Only on one condition," answered the cruel brothers. "You must buy it for 1 blind eye and 1 broken leg. No other price will suit us." Ferko wept bitterly at this, but there was nothing he could do. He bore the terrible hunger until the heat of midday, and then anything seemed better than to go on starving. So he bought bread at the cruel price which his brothers asked. But they were not satisfied with the evil thing they had already done, and gave poor Ferko so small a piece of crust that very soon he was as hungry as ever, and was forced to lose the use of his other eye and leg before he could obtain even a second mouthful. And as soon as they had made it impossible for him either to see or to walk, and had spoilt his good looks completely, the 2 wicked brothers left Ferko groaning on the ground, and continued on without him. Ferko ate the scrap of bread and lay weeping miserably. No one came to his help, and when the sun shone down with cruel heat on him, he made shift to drag himself up a little hill to seek shelter on what felt to him like the trunk of a tree. But it was the foot of a gallows, and on top of it sat 2 ravens. Ferko lay in what little shadow there was, and listened dimly to the ravens talking above him. Soon, however, he held his breath and drank in every word. "Why ever have you brought me here?" croaked the young raven. "Is there anything strange or wonderful about this place?" "I should just think there is," replied the elder bird. "There are things here which don't exist anywhere else in the world. Why, for example, those who bathe their eyes in the dew on this hill become as sharp-sighted as an eagle, even if they were born blind. But more important still is the lake at the foot of the hill, for anyone who bathes in it becomes sound and well on the spot. That's why I have brought you here, so that you can bathe your wing in it and make it as strong as it was before it was pierced by that arrow." Presently Ferko heard the 2 birds flap away slowly, but he stayed where he was, waiting eagerly for the night to fall. Presently he felt the grass and flowers grow wet with dew. Then he buried his face in them until his eyes were full of dewdrops, and when he dried them, he could see more clearly than he had ever done in his life, Thankfully, he crawled down the further side of the hill to where he could see a lake shimmering in the moonlight. No sooner had he dipped his legs in the water than they were as sound and strong as they had been before, and he stood up and danced for joy. Then, having filled his bottle with the magic water, he set off on his way to seek his fortune. He had not gone far when he met a wolf limping on 3 legs and howling dismally. "My friend," said Ferko, "stand still a moment and be of good cheer. I can help you, and help you I will." So saying, he bathed the broken leg in the magic water, and the wolf went gambolling away on 4 sound legs. But before he went, he said, "Call me if you ever need my help, and be sure that I shall come." On went Ferko, and presently he met a mouse creeping on its hind legs because its front ones had been broken in a trap. "My friend," said Ferko, "stand still a moment and be of good cheer. I can help you, and help you I will." A drop of the magic water mended both legs in a moment, and the grateful mouse went scampering away, squeaking, "Call me if you ever need my help, and be sure that I shall come." Ferko continued on his way, but he had not gone far when a queen bee flew against his face, trailing 1 wing behind her, which had been torn by a bird. "My little friend," said Ferko, "stay a moment and be of good cheer. I can help you, and help you I will." It did not need much of the magic water to heal the bee's wing, and she was soon buzzing merrily about, humming, "Call me if you ever need my help, and be sure that I shall come." Ferko continued on his wanderings for many a long day, but at last he came to a strange kingdom and decided to go straight to the palace and see if he could win fortune in the king's service. Into the palace he went, as handsome as the day itself, and the princess fell in love with him instantly. But in the great hall were both his wicked brothers, who had already taken service with the king. The moment they saw Ferko, they were filled with fear and amazement. They were terrified lest he should tell the king of their cruel deeds, and when they saw how everyone admired Ferko, their jealousy and hate grew stronger than it had ever been. So they went to the king in secret and warned him that Ferko was really a wicked magician who had come only to steal the princess and to make a witch of her. Then the king sent for Ferko in a fury and said, "It has come to my ears that you are an evil wizard who wishes to enchant my daughter and carry her away. Therefore I condemn you to death, but I will spare your life if you can perform 3 tasks that I shall set you, and if you fail in any of them, you hang on the nearest tree." Ooh. Then he turned to his favourite advisors, the 2 wicked brothers, and said, "What task shall we set this evil man to perform?" "Your Majesty," they answered, "command him to build in 1 day a palace more beautiful than this." The king was pleased with this idea, and next day Ferko was set out to begin the work in the great meadow by the river. As he sat there sadly wondering what to do, the queen bee brushed against his cheek and said, "Little brother, what can I do to help you?" When Ferko told her all, she said, "Be of good cheer, for all shall be as you wish. Bring the king here early in the morning." So next day Ferko went to the king and said, "Your Majesty, I have obeyed your command. Come with me to the meadow." Full of curiosity, the king and most of his court followed Ferko to the hill not far from the palace and overlooking the meadow. And there below them they saw the most beautiful palace in the world, made by all the bees. The roof was of crimson roses, the windows of lilies, the walls of white carnations, the floors of violets, and the doors of tulips and narcissi. The king was filled with amazement, and the princess's eyes flashed with joy as she turned and smiled sweetly at Ferko. But the wicked brothers drew the king aside and said, "Your Majesty, this only shows how great a master of black magic this evil wizard is. Now command him to gather all the corn in your kingdom, which has been cut but not yet harvested, into one great heap by tomorrow morning, leaving not a grain in the fields." This seemed good to the king, and he issued his command with a scowling face. The princess turned pale as she heard, but Ferko only bowed low and said, "I will do all that I can to satisfy your Majesty." Then he wandered over the fields until he was weary, and sat down wondering where he could find help. "Little brother, what can I do for you?" asked a tiny voice at his side, and there was the mouse whose legs he had mended with the magic water. Ferko told him the king's command, and the mouse said, "Be of good cheer, for all shall be as you wish. Sleep well tonight, and bring the king to the hill first thing in the morning." Ferko did as the mouse told him, and next day he led the king and most of his court to the hill, and there, in a vast heap, was every grain of corn in the kingdom, collected during the night by all the mice in the land. The king was astonished, and the princess danced with joy. But the king's astonishment turned quickly to anger, for he was becoming as cruel as his wicked advisers. After a hasty word with them, he turned back to Ferko and said, "Young man, you have one more task to perform, and if you do not, I shall hang you from yonder tree. By tomorrow night you must drive all the wolves in my kingdom past me as I sit on this hill. Then you may go free, if you leave my land at once." At these words the princess screamed and fainted, but Ferko bowed to the king and set out for the forest. There he called for the wolf king, whose leg he had mended with the magic water, and very soon the great animal came bounding towards him. "Little brother, what can I do for you?" asked the wolf, licking Ferko's feet. Ferko told him, and the wolf answered, "That is easy, for am I not king of all the wolves? Tell that evil king and his choice counsellors to take their seats on the hill an hour before sunset, and then come to the edge of the forest and call for me." Ferko did as he was told, and the king set out from the palace with the two wicked brothers and those of his court who were anxious as they were to see Ferko die a cruel death. But first of all, the king shut up the princess in a dungeon, vowing that she should never see again the wizard who had bewitched her until she saw him hanging dead from a tree. Oh, this is a horrible story. When the king and his court were seated on the hill, Ferko went to the edge of the forest and called, "My friend, King Wolf, come to me as you promised." In a moment the wolf was at his side, and at one howl from him, wolves began pouring out of the forest from every direction and closing in around the hill. Then at a word from the wolf, Ferko mounted on his back and rode up towards the king and his court. The wicked brothers stamped and foamed with rage when they saw that Ferko had again beaten them, but the king was filled with a sudden terror when he saw the enormous pack of wolves all around him. "Enough, enough, we don't want any more," he shouted. But the king wolf said to Ferko, go on, we have a duty to perform." Then the king shouted, "Stop, stop, and I will give you half my kingdom." Ferko paid no attention, and the wolves drew nearer and nearer. "Stop!" shrieked the king. "You shall have my whole kingdom and the princess if you will only send these wolves away." "You shall certainly have both the kingdom and the princess," said the king wolf. And in another moment the wolves had closed in round the king and the wicked brothers and the cruel men of the court, and eaten them up in a trice. Then the wolves went quietly back to their homes in the forest, while Ferko hastened to the palace, set free the princess, and married her that very day. So they became king and queen, and lived their lives in great happiness, much beloved by all the land. The end. Thank you for listening. Have a lovely day or a pleasant evening. Take care of you.